we're going to be doing this conference in April called Gathering.
Right.
Gathering is to essentially start conversations around the role and the responsibilities as it's fluid for people that support others in teams. And this podcast is leading up to that conference, but also to start sharing tips and tricks and insights from people who work in this space.
Yeah, cool.
So that's the goal.
That's cool. Yeah, that's great.
So welcome.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for inviting me. This is great.
So let's jump into it. A little bit of introductions.
Sure.
How do you say your name, by the way, properly?
Deon Blyan.
Blyan.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting name. When I read it was the first time I'd seen that.
Yeah, there's actually a long story, and actually you made a comment about being a musician earlier, and I don't want to do a shameful plug, but I actually wrote a song about my name. Not directly about my name, but it's kind of around that. So I'm originally from Alberta. I was born in Edmonton.
Me too.
Alberta. Is that right?
Look at that.
Really?
We made it to the big smoke.
Isn't that crazy? My family on my father's side is Métis.
Okay.
And I learned through one of his cousins this story. I'll tell you the very quick version of the story, but apparently one of my relatives on his side, this guy, was named Blan Deon. Blan-Dion.
Yeah.
And I think that was his last name, and he was loosely connected to this other guy named Big Bear, who was one of Louis Rial's closest confidants in all of that time around the
early history.
Yeah,
of
like the Red River stuff. Yeah. And so I think the story goes that this guy was migrating from Minnesota up into northern Saskatchewan, where my parents are from, and along the way was getting into trouble with the law, and being a First Nations indigenous person, he might have been more of a darker complexion, and was bootlegging, selling land that wasn't his.
Okay.
And so as he was coming further and further west, he to distance himself from his reputation, he changed his last name to Blyan.
Interesting.
Which was the more white side of that name. And it's crazy. My parents separated when I was very young, and so I haven't really been in a strong connection with my father for all that time. But I asked my mother about this, this person, this story. She ultimately named me Deon, and I said, like, do you know anything about this folklore? And she was like, I had no idea. I knew nothing about that. And so this, his last name was Blan Deon, and my name's Deon Blyan. So yeah, it's really kind of odd.
The inflection. That's amazing.
Really weird.
But how many people can have such a colorful story that's the backdrop of their name? I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Deon, so music being an interest, but tell me a little bit, obviously that is a big part of culture, right? And the expression of humanity.
Yeah.
You work in culture. How'd you come into the space career-wise?
Well, I would say it kind of started for me in 1999. I think it's been about 24 years. I consider my career. I had other things I did up until that point, and I graduated high school in '94 and really started working in a career focus in '99. And I hadn't done a bachelor's of any sort up until that time. So I actually just sort of fell into this job with Sport Check.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Forzani Group was the owner of that company in those days, and I started as a sales associate in a store in Edmonton.
Okay.
Londonderry Sport Check. And I was introduced to, they had created as an organization this department, they called it the training department. And it was, a bunch of people that were based in the head office in Calgary that would go around and talk to store employees about customer service and product and, how to interact with customers and how to fit people with the right hockey skates and skis and running shoes. And I was I just thought, wow, wouldn't that be fun to be a part of that department? And so I kind of made it my goal from then on. And so I moved through stores. I became a department store manager and a store manager, and then eventually actually joined the training department at head office. And that's kind of, I think, where it all began. I started then thinking more and more about, how to engage people in a common topic or a common goal. So communication became a part of my job, where I would have to. It almost started a little bit as like how to win over a room and get people going in the same direction.
Yeah.
And say to somebody, well, we're going to focus on using this selling model or this conversation model that we want you to use when you're speaking with customers on the floor. Mm-hmm. And so from there, it just kind of evolved and took on more of the management focus. And so we had at that organization, we were in the operations department, but there was a need for teaching individuals how to run the stores. And so it became a part of my role to help store managers understand, management skills and leadership skills. And so then that's where it kind of started to snowball a bit. And then in 2013, I actually did a Master's of Arts in Leadership.
Wow.
Organizational leadership from at a school called Royal Roads, based in Victoria, British Columbia.
Wow.
And so
I've never even heard of that school.
Oh, really? Yeah, it was, I think...
it sounds like a cool program.
Yeah, it was originally like a military school, very connected to the Canadian Navy, I think.
Okay.
And then in the 40s or 50s or something, it became more academically focused, and so yeah, it was a really interesting program that really puts you in learning while you're working your job. So it was almost, they almost set it up as, you will probably get more out of the program if you're working full time. There were students in my program that came straight from their bachelor's, and I'm sure they found it highly valuable. But I had been working in sort of a leadership capacity, and had involvement in sort of helping shape culture in an organization for, at that point, 15 years or so. And so all of that experience and sort of exposure to all those things really helped sort of shape my perspective on the teachings and the reading and all the things that we were doing. And so from there I ended up I spent 17 years with the Forzani Group, and I was always in an operational capacity there. And then after I did the master's program, I actually ended up being recruited by my now boss, but she was working for another organization in Toronto. And so that was the first time I entered the world of human resources or people and culture.
Right.
And that was in 2016. And so I moved. I was living in Calgary by then, and actually moved from Calgary to Toronto to work with her. Her name's Kelly Davis. And so, I've been working with her for the last 7 years now at Sunwing Travel Group for the last 3 years. And so, that's a sort of the snapshot, I guess, of that.
No, and I'm sure our audience will appreciate, as I do, hearing that arc, because I feel like, people come to work in this space from so many different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And like EI and an interest in people and an interest in connecting people and supporting people is kind of a common thread.
Yeah.
So I find that very cool to like start from this very tactile, getting people together for a function.
Yeah.
Sales and leadership kind of stuff, coming in then to education really probably informed or crystallized a lot of thoughts that you've been already brainstorming.
Yeah, I think
from your experience.
Yeah, I mean it's also like when you talk about culture, it's like I also think, and I recently wrote a paper or post or whatever that I put on LinkedIn, and that's something that I sort of learned while I was doing that master's program that helps me sort of,
frame your thoughts,
frame my thoughts, and really sort of think about how I see things. And I just think that it's, the article is called, the scope of leadership. Has the scope of leadership changed? And I think it was for so long a common conception that culture was in the hands of the human resources department, or it was something that just sort of happened. And studies will show that culture will just happen, right? So you put a group of people together, call them whatever you want, give them whatever objectives you want, and leave them be. Come back and start to ask questions about what's important and what's not important, and that is what defines the culture, and that will happen, naturally, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, people find their common ground, or otherwise what they don't have common ground on.
Yeah,
and they'll be able to interface.
Yeah, and people will the more dominant personalities within the group will start to set up what is accepted, what is acceptable, what people get in trouble for, what people get rewarded for, and you have then a culture. And I think that's in a way how counterculture,
right,
takes shape within organizations or within communities that want to be, an espoused, set of values or culture. And so I think it's something where, I believe, these days, I think every leader, every person that is what I like to call a talent gatekeeper, that has a say in who joins the organization, who gets opportunities within the organization, who gets elevated within an organization. Those people, those talent gatekeepers, or those leaders, regardless of their function, whether they're a very tactical, sales-based team, or they're a IT team, or they're a airline pilot, or they are in people and culture, have a responsibility to actually shape the culture that is desired for that company.
Right. And the calculation of that, or the strategy around an outcome and wanting to steward culture.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're right. Without that kind of impetus of strategy, it becomes organic, and it becomes reactive, and it becomes this kind of like anti-authoritarian or whatever. Yeah. Like people say, this is what we need, this is what we want, without assuming maybe that it might be possible or even available to them. And really the idea of kind of stewarding culture from open dialogue with the aim of input from all sides is something that requires effort and thought. Yeah.
Well, and I think being deliberate, as an organization, being deliberate about what are the elements. We have what we call a culture equation. And it's like, what are the things that leaders should bring to life with their teams that show and exhibit what the culture could and should be. Mm-hmm. Culture is the result of people's behaviors,
right?
And their you could say their attitudes, or you could say the experience they have, and the way they experience their work life. So when you look at it from that perspective, then the leader's role becomes more. It becomes this responsibility of knowing, okay, is there a set of corporate values or organizational values, and many organizations define those specifically and turn them into an acronym or something like that.
Sure, yeah. Put it on a poster.
Yeah,
somewhere.
Put it on a poster, and it becomes this marketing sort of thing. But and we talk about this a lot within our organization. We have a set of values that we call EPIC, and they're an acronym for entrepreneurial, passionate, innovative, customer-centric.
I like that.
And that actually becomes the definition of how we act, how we make decisions. But does every leader within the organization know what that looks and sounds like in their area? Because that's where it's in their hands to
leading by example,
to figure that out, right? And
interpreting it.
Yeah, and understanding that, and we're an organization owned by an entrepreneur, so his version of entrepreneurial is going to be very different than the IT group's version of entrepreneurial.
Right.
And that's okay. It's just for the leaders in those groups to, define that more clearly and make that tangible for their team, so people can know, oh, okay, I am then contributing in a way that is showing the behaviors that are the things we find important. Sorry about that. And also, I think, in our equation is why do we do what we do as an organization, which is our purpose, right? And so we are. Our definition of that is passionate people making vacation dreams come true. And that is really like, you could argue that, in an organization that sells a product or provides a service, isn't your purpose to, increase the bottom line and make money and have profit. And those things I think are absolutely
the business fundamentals are always part of a business, but
you got to have that.
To encourage the quality of service, you need to have people that are comfortable and happy and fulfilled, providing that service.
Yeah.
So
there's an author and a speaker named Dr. John Izzo, who wrote a book called The Purpose Revolution. He's actually based in Vancouver, but he's worked with organizations all over the world. And he talks about, results are like oxygen for an organization. So you've got to have the profit, the results. You have to have that, or you're not going to survive.
Right.
Obviously, purpose is the aspirational why we do what we do, and so I think having those pieces of the equation gives the leaders and the talent gatekeepers within the organization the tangibles to influence and impact and be deliberate about what the culture should be.
Yeah.
Based on those things. So then it doesn't have that counterculture nature or become, work hard, play harder, or whatever. Some of these things that end up becoming actually quite create an imbalance in people's lives, and so yeah.
Yeah, and of course it's interesting when we play it out to a case example. Let's talk about Sunwing a little bit, because for our audience, especially the global audience outside of Canada, they might not know the brand.
Yeah.
So paint a picture of what Sunwing in a nutshell is. I would say, I might be wrong on this, but I've always assumed that it's kind of like, it seems to be the largest brand that I know in this kind of packaged holiday experience.
Yeah.
So right from flight to hotel to vacation, it's like everything that you guys do for people, and you make it easy for them to quickly get out to the beach.
Yeah. It's I really appreciate that you know that. So often I think people assume it's an airline, and we have an airline, and the airline is integral to our business, but we are a vertically integrated vacation company. So the organization started as what's called a tour operator.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to book a vacation package, you could contact somebody at one of our travel agencies or online.
And this was founded, you mentioned an entrepreneur owns the company.
Yeah, so the founder of the organization is named Colin Hunter.
Okay.
And his son, Stephen Hunter, is the CEO and runs the organization today. And so family owned, privately held, largest vertically integrated tour operator in North America.
In North America?
Yes.
That includes the States?
Yeah. And
wow.
So the organization has a number of sister companies that all complement the the customer journey.
Sure.
And so you're right. We have, I believe it's nearly 50 hotels within our Blue Diamond Resorts division.
Okay.
That the organization owns, but we
those are assets that are owned or managed assets.
There's in Cuba it's a management scenario. In Mexico, in Jamaica, Dominican Republic, St. Lucia, Antigua, there's a number of owned assets there. So that division is sort of our exclusive brands for hotels.
Yeah, because you can manage the experience a lot better.
Exactly. Yeah, and so the Royalton is the 5-star. We have Planet Hollywood. As a brand, we have Mystique as a brand. But we also will we'll book travelers at other hotels. So we actually have access to up to 800 hotels throughout sort of the Caribbean for travelers. So we're not it isn't just the small window of those 50 hotels. So, and then we actually have a destination management company called Nexus Tours that's based in Cancun. So that they do like transfer. So when you land at the airport, you get on the shuttle, you go to the hotel. But if you want to do an excursion or you want to, do something extra within your vacation, they help. Yeah, exactly. They take you on those experiences.
Wow.
Then we have an organization in Atlanta, Georgia called Vacation Express, which kind of does a bit of everything that we do in all the other areas. So they do tour operation booking and all that kind of stuff, but they do a lot of booking focused on our American or U.S. Travelers, and so they'll book on different airlines there, whereas in Canada, there is we have our Sunwing airline that services those routes, but our travel agents and sell-off vacations is what our travel agency wing is called. We'll use Air Canada and WestJet and other air carriers to get people where they need to go. So,
wait, so this is interesting because there's a lot going on. At Sunwing.
Yeah.
Assumedly, the staff base is global or at least across North America.
Yeah.
How many people are employed by Sunwing?
Well, when you look at the Blue Diamond Resort side is the biggest, and then Nexus Tours is up there, and then in Canada, so it's probably close to 20,000.
Wow,
all in. Yeah. When you consider all those
all the different functions, all the different functions of the business.
Yeah,
man, that's a big group of people.
It is, and each of those divisions is we apply the same culture equation. So our epic values and our purpose statement have been adopted by each of those divisions. And so when you experience our people at the hotel, at the all-inclusive, they know what epic is, and they're thinking about being epic, and they know that we're in the business to make vacation dreams come true. And so it's a powerful thing actually when you consider 20,000 employees all over the Western Hemisphere,
right? From different cultures,
from different backgrounds,
different locations,
different cultures. Yeah, people in Jamaica, people in Mexico, people in Toronto, people in Edmonton, people in Atlanta. All sort of thinking and moving in the same direction. It's really exciting.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think it's thrilling, the idea of, especially the sector that you're in, right? So we talked a little bit, off camera about this, or I mentioned this, that being in travel and leisure and facilitating, passionately facilitating these kind of like people's escapes from the norm, right? Vacations are these wonderful opportunities for everyone to reset and have the truest experience of themselves as possible, kind of thing.
Yeah.
How does that role play into the culture of the company, and how do you enable your staff to not just appreciate but also experience and know kind of what the guest experience is?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined the organization, I had spent 20 years in retail operations. And so the travel industry, and certainly being, a part of an organization with an airline was brand new to me. And something that I have experienced within this organization that has been so tangible and so powerful to me is the E in epic, the entrepreneurial, being entrepreneurial, is so tangible within our organization, and our people they take ownership over what it is they do. And I think it is because of their understanding of what the customer is purchasing, and knowing that our product is that experience. But along the way, there are all these touch points where we have an opportunity to interact with and strengthen, that customer value proposition.
Right.
And so people are, in Sunwing Travel Group, people are so passionate about making that the best experience for the traveler. And so, I don't know if that answers your question well, but it is something that everybody is so like emotionally connected to what it is that's happening. And when we have, flight schedule changes, or there are, we call them IROPS in the airline industry, irregular operations, if there's weather, if there's a, hurricane, all of those sorts of things, people don't, the people in the organization do not hesitate to jump up to do the right thing to ensure that the customer gets where they need to go or gets the experience they want.
Because it takes that proactive, attitude and
absolutely
knowledge set to be able to kind of react without being reactive and not scrambling, right?
Yeah.
So I think the end-to-end solution that you guys offer, it sounds like it enables that entrepreneurship because there's more tools at people's disposal on your team to be able to call up and make things happen out of.
Yeah, especially, on the airline side and the hotel side, it's something where, the guest experience is so important. And it really feels like the teams on those sides are enabled to make good decisions and to be able to, take that experience into their own hands and ensure that they understand how to provide that. And I think that, our epic values and our purpose statement really help shape that and frame that for those teams. So it's important.
Okay, so you've been with the organization through the last couple of years of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Are there any anecdotes that you'd like to share from that experience and indications also of within your sector, like what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's been intense. I mean, I started in August of 2019 with the organization, so I think I managed to clock 6 months before the pandemic really hit, and it was really intense, and it was something that I think really gave the organization a chance to. And they've done, like, when you look back on the history of Sunwing Travel Group, there have been so many things that have been similar but not quite as elevated as the pandemic.
Yeah.
There have been ice storms. There have been, there was a whole thing around the MAX 8 airplane that we own some of those, and so there was a grounding of those airplanes. And so a lot of those sort of things really created these, and there's been hurricanes every hurricane season since the beginning of time.
Right.
And so those sorts of things, I think, especially again on the hotels and the airline side and the destination management side, the groups that are on the front line and not in the offices were totally prepared for things to be kind of nutty. They're just, totally accustomed, to these situations where things go haywire, and they, know how to persevere through that and deal with that. I think where it's been a really positive learning experience is in the areas where, perhaps a more traditional view of being in the office was the approach for the organization, and we've learned quickly and drastically how to be hybrid.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Are there tools you rely on now that you've had to kind of like create a stack out of? Is it a digital solution thing to manage communication and schedules?
Well, it was interesting that we were already a Microsoft shop. Okay. So Microsoft Teams was already on everybody's computer.
Right.
And so thankfully it wasn't a mad dash to find a video conferencing tool or a chat tool or anything like that. We had that in place. It was, though, a fast immersion in learning how to use those well.
Right.
And I think that I remember, in my 6 months before the pandemic hit, having to do, because my team and I'm within the people and culture group that interacts with all of those divisions I talked about earlier.
Sure.
And so we had meetings previously where we would have, folks from Cancun, Panama, Atlanta, together on meetings where we were trying to do these video calls where we were kind of, messing it up a little bit and hearing the echo and the feedback and all that kind of stuff.
So, Are you there?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're on
Can
mute.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. And it's even to this day, the mute thing is a funny thing where it still gets, sort of accidentally happens.
We did a session in the same studio. I think it was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
and it was a recorded call, and this is stuff we do every day, and even in the studio with professional producers. It was the same thing, and it turned out to be someone's Bluetooth connection on the other side.
You're kidding? Yeah. So I mean, that sounds kind of that sounds small, but I think that was a big thing where we immediately started sharing information around how to use Microsoft Teams better, and then people just really got used to doing that. Mm-hmm. And on a grander scale, I think about all of that, where it was one day the world was told, okay, you're going to work from home today.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what? Mm-hmm. What do you mean? How do we do that? And then, fast forward to a year after that, when people started talking about coming back to the office, it was like, okay, we're going to start coming back to the office. And the reaction was, what?
Right.
Right. It was so funny because it was like, the thing that everybody thought was impossible to do was fully possible.
Yeah.
And then again, it was like, okay, well, there's a new paradigm of what's possible. We can go back to the office a little bit. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, 2 years in, people not necessarily wanting to come back to the office, despite and that reaction being like, oh, but wait, no, now we can.
Yeah.
Feeling that what has always been the standard, and now having to readdress what your sense of kind of workplace standards are based off of people's new experiences.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's like any new thing for individuals that that created habits and had and felt accustomed to a certain way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And so that was for us going to the office every day, and where some people would have a extremely long commute or would be riding public transit. And so now when you look at the things that are tangible within a company culture, in our company culture, there is a desire for the employees, not necessarily the leaders. I think, and that's something I was trying to get to with that Gallup poll thinking, was that leaders who are empowered to make decisions always, this study showed that through the pandemic, they always felt psychologically safe. They always felt, kind of okay. Mm-hmm. Where it was the layer below people that were decision makers felt a little more, unstable for certain reasons through the pandemic. And it's that group that I think we have seen through some of our employee engagement surveys and these sorts of data points, we have seen where it's those people that feel the need for the ability to work hybrid and the ability to work from home on a day where you're doing something that doesn't involve needing to talk to anybody else. Why take a commute
just to focus in isolation?
To like rip through an Excel spreadsheet at your desk with headphones on. Yeah. And people walking around behind you, when that's the type of work that you may do better from your desk in your home office at home or your kitchen table. And so I think we learned a lot of things through that, and I think we learned. I'd even heard it anecdotally mentioned in the organization, like we've proven that we can be productive working hybrid. I think that the misconception at the beginning was, okay, are we going to be able to actually get anything done?
Yeah, how will we actually get everyone around the same table
if there's no table? How are we going to know people are doing anything? And then again, I think it is what I said earlier about that entrepreneurial and passionate mindset that everybody shows within the organization carried over into that and said, well, take any of the employees, and I think you would see them say, well, I still have that focus, and I can still get this done, from home. Mm-hmm. And so so now we're in that place where there is I believe, and I think as an organization we believe there's great value in being in the same room with people.
Sure.
And so now it's sort of a shift in understanding when we come to the office, how do we use that time?
Yeah, and maybe even what the office is to enable that time being used for something extra beneficial.
Yeah, and thinking, and it's a new, I think, skill set, or it's a new mindset for leaders to think about. It isn't about my team coming and clocking in at the office and clocking out from the office. Mm-hmm. It's my team coming and what is the in-person engagement that we can build for that day, so that they feel like it was worth coming all that way.
Right.
If when they are coming a long way for that, or even doing things that are less focused on the work and more about the team galvanizing and understanding each other, so that when we are doing meetings and having decision-making sessions over a video call, we don't have those intangible barriers that would have existed previously.
We're seeing this a lot at StartWell, where every day we're having up to 20 teams meeting on campus, of various sizes, right, and various formats of meeting. Everything from CMO doing a quarterly presentation of what's coming up ahead to the marketing team, to whatever investor relations things, to small groups just kind of getting together to jam. And we're seeing this from everyone. Is this like a want for coming together to be a social reset? That doesn't necessarily mean people are like having drinks and just want a beautiful catered meal and they'll go home. But it's literally to like get past the screen and kind of have fun. Like we keep hearing these two words, right? One has been a mantra for StartWell, which is happiness. It's an open-ended thing.
Yeah.
But we want, when people leave this place, to feel happier for having been here. And there's a whole suite of things that we employ to do that. But fundamentally, people who leave their sessions at StartWell are really, they should feel great for having been with their people.
Yeah.
And that feeling definitely comes from having fun and comes from enjoying their time together.
Yeah.
And those bonds you want to strengthen, I think, in every organization, right?
Yeah.
Because people rely on those bonds to be able to communicate.
Yeah. It is a critical thing. And even, well before the pandemic, I think, I personally really started to realize, especially with, working with our geographically dispersed groups and all these different divisions, time in person is so important to have in order to, build trust, build that rapport, so that when you are on a video call, there isn't that veil, that thin veil of like, are they understanding me? Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Do we really? Can we talk freely? I think that's critical. And it's still. I think it's also like this. The idea of having social time together is also, I think, still an uneasy place for some people.
Sure.
Where and even just like, again, like the world telling us to isolate, and then going, okay, now we're not isolating anymore, let's get back together. It
can be jarring.
There's a thing, yeah, exactly. I think that's a great word. Is like it's jarring to be like, oh wait, so I'm in this office and the door's closed with someone, and I've been told for 2 years I'm not supposed to do that. And then as you're starting to do that again, there's that stuff to get over. There's also like, even there's some very tangible, like I even noticed personally, going back to the office and having more in-person conversations, I would feel more tired at the end of the day, or my voice would feel kind of croaky, because you're used to just talking to a screen where you don't have to project very much.
Sure.
But then if you're in a room with people, you have to project a bit more, or you're more excited or whatever. So there's like all of these little things, I think, that maybe are, and I don't know if I'm solving anything here, but maybe those are the things that are contributing to some of the mental health situations that are happening.
Sure, of course.
I don't know, but I also thought about, like, so the idea of being together and building a rapport with each other. We've got a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, which my team owns within our organization as well. We talk a lot about this, the sense of belonging. So employees feeling a sense of belonging, and we do borrow that from the world of DEI, but I think it fits in with any part of an organization where people will, in order for someone to feel authentically themselves, but like they belong to the team, I don't know that you can only accomplish that through video calls and telephone calls. I think that you need time together,
I believe so.
in person. And I think that does help create that gel, and bring that together within teams.
Because it's like belonging to a company can be a very abstract, phenomena. until it's experienced. And then how do you experience it? I mean, one, it could be that old world. Now we're saying old world way of walking into a building.
Yeah.
And then you see that brand and you say, okay, I'm part of it because I walked underneath the sign.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it, which is a kind of more sustainable concept, right, is that you share the experience of ownership of that brand, and that empowers you to feel like you belong to the collective.
Yeah.
So then that supports culture, right?
It does, yeah. And I think the strong version of that is also that you feel like you're yourself.
Yeah.
And I think those are almost contradictory things. It's like I'm authentically me, but I belong to that group.
Well, it's interesting because this is something that, like, for many years in kind of corporate culture in North America has not necessarily been valued or celebrated through kind of like, formal dialogue is the idea of, really employee participation.
Yeah.
And I don't mean stock options.
Yeah, yeah.
But instead that sense of empowerment, and I like the fact that you guys see entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship as a kind of a value, because that ties into a sense of ownership and an empowered position within that sense of ownership to make decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And that's a huge thing. Not every organization has that, where they're looking to their employees to actually solve problems and not be just given the keys to put in the lock every day.
Yeah. It's that made me think of, there's this trend of white papers and articles being written about this topic called quiet quitting.
Okay,
right
yes.
Now, and
school me on this, because I keep hearing all these phrases and they're like, I'm too busy to like break it down.
I haven't done enough reading to be an expert on it, but I think that it's about, the way I understand it is it's really like kind of opposite of what you just said. So it's like the idea of employee engagement and employees being invested and proactive in what they're doing. There's a trend right now where, and I think it's particularly around all of these new things that we're dealing with. So employees wanting more hybrid opportunities, employees wanting to feel like they belong but be their authentic selves, and to know that the organization that they work for are doing good things in the world and aren't just being stagnant in diversity, equity, inclusion, psychological safety, safe environment, all those sorts of things. The idea of quiet quitting, I think, is that people are not technically quitting, but they are
like
saying,
withdrawing.
I'm going to withdraw. I've tried hard enough for the last couple of years to get you to realize, my lived experience.
Okay.
So I mean, a good example could be around somebody that said we need to do more around indigenous history, or we need to do more around. We need to understand a bit more around transgender and binary communities, and or non-binary people, and understanding how to be a welcome environment for that type of thing. People, those would be examples of topics that employees may have felt empowered to bring up and say, what are we doing around this? And then the quiet quitting idea is when they're met with roadblocks to those things.
Right.
Whether it's their leader or whether it's the organization as a whole that kind of goes, we're not worried about that kind of stuff. We're doing other things and we're making profit and whatever. Where they're like, okay, well, I've tried hard enough to be a positive influence on the team, or I've tried hard enough to, live up to what I've been asked to live up to as an employee that is, supposed to be contributing to the organization. I'm just going to collect my paycheck, quiet up, quiet down a little bit, hang out in my, my desk or whatever, and not really put in the effort anymore to contribute.
And it's a sad phenomenon, because it just means that people aren't really bringing their best self to to work. And as an employer, of course, that's always what you want. Ideally, at least an entrepreneurial minded employer, like I would say that I want people to come, be excited.
Yeah.
This is a big part of their life. Being at work is the bigger part of their life than sleeping.
Yeah.
Or as important, and it should be as restful, and it should be as empowering, and it should be as fulfilling as doing something as, natural.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I mentioned earlier that sort of question that I had in that one article I wrote about, like, has the scope of leadership changed? And I think all of this reinforces that it truly has, and it's interesting because when you think about, what do you sign up for as a senior manager or a leader within an organization? I think, if you compare today to 20 years ago, the list of things that we need to understand as leaders and the things that we need to, espouse, I guess, for the lack of a less academic word, it's a bigger list. Like, do I as a leader need to be an expert in the world of anti-Black racism? Maybe not. But do I need to understand what that's about a little bit, so that the Black Canadians on my team feel themselves and a part of the team?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do I need to understand, how to counsel somebody with a mental illness? Maybe not. I don't need to be an expert in that. But do I need to understand the spectrum of mental health to be able to see when somebody's not themselves that day?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, as a leader. Do I need to, be able to counsel someone that has experienced sexual harassment or sexual violence within the workplace? I might not need to be an expert in counseling that person, but do I need to understand the process and the program the organization has in place to deal with that and what our values are around preventing that? Absolutely. And so anyway, I'm going through this list of actual specific things that we have within our company, but the scope of a leader today is different than it was before, and I think there's a greater responsibility to look at the holistic picture of what does a human being experience in their work life.
Right.
And that, I think, builds and supports a culture that is, welcoming and is safe, and is vibrant.
I agree. Yeah, and I always, part of my scholastic, endeavors at McGill when I was younger, were really looking at a lot of cultural things, and I specifically did comparative religion, and then I looked at the evolution of music and the evolution of electronic music.
Cool. Oh, cool.
But for me, I look at in the last, let's call it 20, 30 years, with an increased, secularization of society, especially here in North America, and then urban stratification, where people's living links to culture and family are a little bit stressed. People are more distanced from familiar things.
Yeah.
I see especially that sense of belonging, if it can be fostered at an organization where someone spends every day.
Yeah.
The potential for empowering those people to be enabled to not only contribute to a company with a greater, let's say, generosity and confidence.
Yeah.
But that idea of a team strengthening to, support individuals that belong to it naturally.
Yeah.
Is the opportunity is very high and higher than ever. So in a way, it's like the responsibilities have changed, but at the same time, the opportunity has changed.
Yeah.
To kind of give people the company and say, what you have is you have access to this amazing space, people, set of responsibilities, yes, but things that you can do to actually have fun doing things.
Yeah.
Every day.
It's such a good point. I really like the way you put that, and it really is I love that. It's a responsibility, but it's an opportunity, and the great opportunity, I think, lies in the impact that leaders and people in organizations can have on the organization and each other. Not to leave out the consumer, but I think from a culture perspective, we're talking about, inside the organization. So
for sure. Yeah. And that exactly. We haven't really dug into this consumer experience side of the story, but suffice it to say for this conversation, as an organization is happier, more comfortable, more enabled, more empowered, they're able to have, extend that face.
Yeah. The employee group it should be a reflection of the consumer group. I mean, there should be a correlation there. And if you want to stand for something for your consumer, then your employees need to understand what you stand for them. So there's an employee value proposition and there's a customer proposition.
100%.
And in order to uphold the customer proposition, the employees need to understand, and I think for us, it's that epic values and the purpose, passionate people making vacation dreams come true, that's where it begins. But then you go even further where, not every single one of, our customer base is a diverse group. Our employee base should reflect the diverse group of travelers we have, and should should see themselves in our advertising, should see themselves in in our properties. Like it should be there should be that sort of thing. I'm leaning on the diversity piece again, but
it's an interesting point. Yeah, whether it's that piece or anything else, I think the idea of now also we are in this. We've shifted in the last. I've believed it's been longer than just in the last few years, but in this new era of opportunity where the marketing tools at our disposal enable brands to have a greater communication with their customer base.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is about brand expression and some forms of marketing and advertising, just in terms of mechanics and logistics, end up being these sort of clunky processes.
Yeah.
That don't reflect the brand.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of effort to look at the whole stack and say, okay, well, as a company, how are we expressing ourselves, and how do we might know how to express ourselves better, but we're just not doing it.
Yeah.
And we want to do it, so we've got to take a deep look at that. And
yeah.
It's true. A lot of this is about communication, and marketing can let down that ability for a company to speak. Or it can just transcend it. And empowering your staff to be able to speak to customers directly is its own form of marketing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Our marketing, I mean, I'll have to, I'm not a marketing expert, but our marketing group has done some amazing things recently that I think really, really support the transcendent side that you talked about. And we're really proud of the work they've been doing recently. It's innovative, and they just did I won't get into this too deeply, but they just did a consumer insights project where they really asked our consumer, what do you think of this organization? And it was time for them to really sort of look at that and almost recalibrate on, okay, that's your perception of who we are, and this is what we want to build more upon. And so that we have a new marketing campaign called More.
Okay.
In Canada that you'll see a little bit of, but it's a dynamic, really fresh, really bright, diverse. So the human beings that you see in the imagery reflect the diversity in our country and the countries that we operate in, and so we're really proud of all the work they've been doing.
I'm excited because I know historically, like, this is for all our listeners and our viewers who are outside of Canada who don't know this, like, crazy seasonality that we deal with here.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, all Canadians look forward to their summer or their winter vacations to go somewhere warm at least once a year if they can manage it. And they rely on, obviously companies like Sunwing, but they don't rely on them as a Expedia alternative a lot of the time. It's more like every year I'm going to plan my 1, 2, 3 vacations and rely on this company to give me not just my vacations, but give me that escape as something I can rely on all the time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because the role that you play in your customers' lives is very large, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool that you recognize that. And I think that's something that empowers that feeling of entrepreneurialness and that passion that we talked about earlier. I think that especially in our sales side and our travel agents and even on the airline side, they see that this is somebody's vacation that they've planned for the last year, and now it's happening. And so they're so invested in helping that 2-week or 1 week or 3-week journey be the dream that they wanted to come true, and so it's that's so cool.
Cool, man. Well, it was awesome spending some time talking about a bunch of topics. As we lead into or towards April and the conference coming up, Gathering 2023, we're going to do a couple of these sessions that will be industry-focused roundtables. So cool. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, I'd love to be a part of that. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Kasim.
Thank you.
It's been fantastic.